Mitali, thanks so much for joining us with all those details. But let's shift focus back to macros then. And we just had inflation data come in that was flashing for you on your bottom of your screens. We did discuss the inflation data. But to discuss that further, we are now joined by Gaura Sengupta, IDFC First Bank, who's now joining us. Gaura, afternoon, and thank you for joining us on the phone line. First up, your initial take on the numbers that have been reported. Core inflation at 7.5% and food inflation at 6.14%. Is that a concern for the street?
So the pickup in WPI inflation is basically because of the pickup in fuel. So that continues to be on the higher side. For example, consolidated fuel and power is still up by around 27.4%. Yes, there is some incremental pickup also in food inflation. But I would say if you're looking at it does tell you that the margin pressure will be there for, let's say, companies in Q1 because of the pickup in fuel, raw material costs, prices because of Strait of Hormuz. But our expectation is that going forward, with this current escalation that has happened should ease off. And what we have learned is that whenever there is a credible ceasefire that has happened between Iran and US, crude oil prices have corrected sharply. And that also helps that in the remainder of the year, if, let's say, there is a credible peace process between these two countries, there is an expectation that crude prices could again resume their downward trend. And in fact, by Q4, we could have even further easing of crude oil prices because you'll have fresh suppliers in the market. So from that perspective, it's a temporary negative that shows that there is margin pressure in Q1, which will reflect in listed company performance, in negatively impact possibility of GDP. But if you look at CPI, we are not seeing too much pass-through from now, from producers to consumers.
And Gaura, there's still a lot of uncertainty on the geopolitical front. We are expecting crude oil prices to decline, but we are talking about this on a day like today when crude oil prices have shot up overnight with Brent now at $85 per barrel. What kind of impact is this likely to have on inflation numbers for the next month? And I wanted specifically your thoughts on the food inflation number, because that, if we compare on a month-on-month basis, it has risen from about 4.49% in the previous month to about 6.14%. This is a sudden pickup that we have seen on a month-on-month basis, isn't it? Isn't that concerning?
Some of the pickup is also visible. Let's say there's also a pickup in both primary products as well as manufactured food products. It can also reflect the fact that the monsoon has been off to a weak start. So it is reflecting in the WPI, and yes, it does pose a possible upside risk to food inflation showing up in CPI. Even in CPI, if you look at the June food inflation, it had risen to around 5.1%. But given the adverse heat wave we've had, given the extremely low rainfall that we've had in the month of June, where we had almost a 40% deficit, in that context, some pickup in food inflation was expected, but we are not seeing a very sharp spike. The good part, I would say, is as you talked about the crude oil prices going to 85, our expectation is that there will be a resolution. It may take some time. But I think the good part that we have seen in the past is, in the recent ceasefire, is that crude oil market supplies are normalizing faster than earlier anticipated. So earlier there was expectation, even if there was a ceasefire, the crude oil prices will take time to reduce. What we have seen when the truce was done towards the second half of June into July, that we saw a much sharper decline in crude oil prices, and production levels also in GCC countries had begun to pick up. Though this near-term escalation, it's a negative, but we still believe that there will be a quick resolution, and the movement of freight through the Strait of Hormuz, if it is negatively impacted, it will be short-lived.
Okay, so that's the view coming in on the inflation going forward, and a lot of it depends on how things shape up globally. But Gaura, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us on such a short notice and sharing your thoughts on inflation going forward. But that's all the time we have on this edition of the show. But thanks so much for tuning in. All About Your Company will come up next.